Welcome to the Daughter Arise channel. My name is Yvonne and this channel is all about bringing you content about childhood sexual abuse. On this channel I share with you things to do with my experience of going through this childhood trauma. I also share with you news stories and articles that I come across and add my thoughts and commentary to them. Also, from time to time I interview other survivors and their supporters in hopes of raising awareness about this childhood trauma. So if this is the type of content that you're looking for, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you do like the content, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. So today I just want to talk with you about a question that I get asked a lot when I do training with different multi-agency partners on familial childhood sexual abuse, and as a public speaker when I do speak at different places like universities, organisations, about my experiences of going through childhood sexual abuse. The question that I get asked a lot is, what do I think would have prevented my childhood sexual abuse? Now, I've had a lot of time to think about that question because I have been asked this question over the last 10, 11 years, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on my experience as well, having come through the other side of my childhood abuse. And there are things I think that have to be taken into consideration. As I've said before, the 80s was a very innocent era to grow up in, seemingly, I should say. So a lot of things that should have been discussed or should have been out in the open, when I look back on it now, was actually undercover, was hidden. Also as well, my family dynamics, growing up in my family were very, very secretive, very, very closed off. We didn't mix with anybody really outside our family circle. Of course, me, my brother and sister had friends on the estate that we grew up on, but it wasn't a thing where, we mixed with other adults apart from at school with teachers and stuff. Another thing that kind of was affecting, me not being able to tell anybody about my childhood sexual abuse was having the information and education to know what was happening to me. It was only when Childline came to my school in 1989, when I was 13 years old, that I had the information about what was happening to me, which was childhood sexual abuse. In primary school, that information was not given to me. There wasn't any classes to talk about our bodily parts, appropriate relationships, sexual abuse. There was nothing like that. Also, another thing that needs to be considered is the systems that was in place during the 80s. Now, when I was taken into care, it was just on the cusp of the Children's Act 1989 being brought into effect. I think it was October or September 1989 it was brought in, and I was just about going into care around that time. It was the first big real revision of the Children's Act, a complete reform, I think, since about the 60s or something like that. And I definitely do believe that had I been brought into care probably a little bit later, maybe things might have been a little bit different for me. As I said, with the school structure and the way things were set up, there wasn't a safeguarding lead in primary school. There wasn't an allocated worker or person to go to report if anything wasn't going okay at home. The police system was a bit different there as well, because as I've shared on videos how it was set up, and I found this out much later on in speaking to a detective who was part of a child sexual abuse team for 25 years, is that it basically would have been a thing, how it was viewed then, as my word against my father's word. As I said before, and as I shared in my book Daughter Arise, I will leave a link to it in the description box below. That is how the case was viewed, even in light of evidence. So the systems that were in place as well, I don't think were really great for helping a child like me that was going through sexual abuse. I could only really think about 3 things that would have prevented my CSA. So the first thing, which I think probably might be an obvious thing, is my mum taking me out of that situation. As I've shared in my book, as I've shared during my talks, my mum knew what was going on. I found out some years later that she knew what was going on. I've talked about the fact that when my dad used to come into the bathroom those weekday nights, during the 5 years he was sexually abusing me, my mum could see him coming into the bathroom because her bedroom was opposite the bathroom. He wasn't doing it with my brother, he wasn't doing it with my sister, he was only coming in there when I was having my evening wash. Now that is the first thing I think about, the fact that she knew what was going on and didn't do anything to get me out of that situation. But also as well, I can see obviously that my dad was quite controlling. He had, you know, a way of just controlling the women in the family. And I don't think that my mum had the confidence or self-esteem to stand up to my dad, because she herself had been under his thumb for many years. The next thing that came to mind about what would have prevented my CSA, besides my mother safeguarding me, is education in school at a much earlier age. One of the things I talk about a lot when I do talks, when I do my workshops with professionals, is about giving children the knowledge and vocabulary in an age-appropriate way. One of the biggest weapons that can be used against a child that is going through childhood sexual abuse is not knowing what is happening to them is wrong, and the perpetrator, the paedophile who's doing it, using the fact that they are in the dark about what is going on with them. Now, for a lot of survivors, including myself, we definitely knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what was wrong. And I do think that education would definitely have helped to raise awareness for me as a child that is going through it. Also as well, knowing who I could take that information to. I think that in school, if there was a teacher that was telling us this information and taking ownership of that, saying, you know, if you're going through this, you can report this to me and I will help you, I definitely think that could have possibly helped me. As I mentioned, in primary school, there was nothing in place. I think that in primary school there should have been somebody in place to report that to, and also education for us as children to know that if somebody's sexually abusing us, that it is wrong, you know, telling us obviously that it's not our fault, where we can get help, and just having that knowledge and information to hand. It might not have prevented my childhood sexual abuse, because as I said, my family was quite closed off, so he was able to kind of keep everything under one roof. But I definitely think it would have given me the knowledge sooner to understand what was going on with me, and maybe then I would have done something about it if I would have had or known where to go and get help. Another thing maybe that would have helped is maybe that teachers or other people were trained in the signs to recognise a child that is going through childhood sexual abuse, because obviously even with education it possibly could have been hard for me to even articulate even at primary school age. Obviously as a teenager I was a little bit more kind of forthright in sharing that information, just because I didn't want my dad touching me anymore. I don't honestly know if these things would have made a very big difference, apart from the first point that I shared with you about my mum removing me from that situation. I'm not too sure about how other systems in place or things like that could have possibly taken me out of it, but maybe it would have alerted people to my abuse sooner, because as I've said, 5 years I had to wait in order to tell somebody what was happening to me, and that was due in part because of the lack of information I had about what was happening to me. You know, obviously now I can share what things that I felt could have possibly helped me, but at the time those provisions, those support networks weren't there. So that is why, through my experience, through my books, through my talks, through, you know, the workshops that I run, my main aim is to make sure that professionals and other people, adults, have that information so that they can be the one that helps a child that is going through it. It's definitely not easy when you're a child to even articulate, but I hope that today that, you know, there are a lot of things in place to help children who are going through it now. I know from speaking to a lot of professionals that, you know, it is not so, but one can only hope that there are things being put in place to enable a child that's going through it to, you know, speak out. So that is it for this video. I just wanted to share that with you. If you are interested in getting any of my books on my experience of going through childhood sexual abuse and the aftermath, about how it affected my life, or Choose Life, which is a practical empowerment workbook that helps survivors to articulate and find their voice. My 2 other books, which is more about personal development, life after abuse, you know, just living an exceptional and not expected life and stepping it into the unknown, to have courage to do different things. I will leave links to those books as well, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.